Alright, the video I'm going to do right now and is Will the Real Moses Please Stand Up? The Egyptian myth of Osarseph, who freed up a group of enslaved lepers, is incredibly similar to the Exodus story, but I'm going to say this. It's not a myth as far as about Osarseph. What's the myth is the Exodus story is really the myth. Basically, what you're going to read to show you that Moses was nothing but he was Osarseph before his name was Moses. And from the Jewish people, basically Josephus, all you got to do, you can go up and look up Osarseph in Wikipedia, and you'll see who and the details about who the origin of Moses really is. So we're going to read this, and I'm going to slide on down here a little bit. All right. Okay, it says, one day King Amenophes of Egypt decided that he wanted to see the gods with his own eyes. He called on one of the kingdom sages and asked him how could he make his wish come true. The wise man replied that the king could do so if he were to cleanse Egypt of the lepers and other impure people. The king took immediate action. He gathered all the people with disabilities and diseases and expelled them all to the stone quarries east of the Nile to endure hard labor and be separated from the rest of the population. When the sage saw the king's acts of cruelty, which were committed because of his prophecy, he feared the rage of the gods and the destructive consequences of his act and killed himself. The lepers labored in the quarries for a long time before Amenophes finally allocated the empty city of Avaris for them to live in. Upon arrival, they made an Egyptian priest from Heliopolis named Osarseph their leader. You see that? And swore to obey his every order. Osarseph assigned the lepers a series of rules, each of them a violation of an Egyptian law. Among other things, he forbade them to eat the animals that were sacred to Egyptians, and further ordered that these animals be slaughtered whenever they were encountered. These things that the Egyptians was against, but Osarseph gave the okay to do so. Now we're going to read on down. Next, he dispatched emissaries to the Hyksos, a tribe of shepherds that had been expelled from Egypt by the pharaohs and were living at the time in the city called Jerusalem. Now, if you look at the Hebrews today, what would you think the Hebrew? What would you think a shepherd is? You see them loud guys. They be on the corner screaming and yelling, "Thus saith the Lord God," and Jeremiah, they be yelling in your face and all that other shit. They were shepherds, all right? The Hyksos were no different than what the Hebrew shepherd was. And the Hyksos are indeed the Hebrews. You're going to see why we match the two, all right? So, let's read on. Okay, where I'm at. Okay. Now, you already know that what do the Hebrews, also I want to add, what do you think the Hebrews always call their homeland? Jerusalem. Y'all get that now? The Hyksos were shepherds in Jerusalem. The Hebrew Israelites said their motherland is Jerusalem, and invited them to join forces with the lepers and defeat Pharaoh. Now, this is what. Now, I'm moving a little too ahead. Now he dispatched a messenger to the Hyksos. In other words, he reached out to the Hyksos, a tribe of shepherds that have been expelled from Egypt. But first of all, these guys already been expelled. Now you see why the Hebrew Israelites hate the Egyptians so much. You know what I mean? You see why they hate the Egyptians. You see why they hate them. And what he did was he sent for the Hyksos, a tribe of shepherds that had been expelled from Egypt by the pharaohs and were living at that time in the city of Jerusalem, and invited them to join forces with the lepers. So basically, Osarseph he sent out help of the shepherds that were exposed by the Egyptians. So listen, let's all come together. Let's all come together and wage war against the pharaohs. All right? You're going to see in detail when we read along how did the Exodus story came about of Moses freeing how it was plagiarized with Moses getting God's people crossing through the Red Sea. The Exodus bullshit that they put out. All right, so we want to get into all that. We're going to read into all that too. Hold on. Chanel, can you turn this air off? It's a little cold. Turn this little down. All right. After anointing himself king over the shepherds and lepers. So basically, Osarseph, Moses, he anointed himself. He anointed himself king over the shepherds, which were the Hyksos, the Hebrew Israelites. Could you look at the Hebrews? Who do they follow? Who law do they follow? The laws of Moses. And lepers. Osarseph changed his name to Moses. Let's read that again. Osarseph changed his name to Moses. To someone who has been hearing about the Israelites, slavery and exodus from Egypt since childhood, this story sounds oddly familiar. Let's read that again. Now let's get this the man who name this is. He's talking about who this is. All right, hold on. And his name is Ofri Elani. Actually, he's not. You can tell that he's a Jewish guy who wanted to bring this knowledge out. Okay. Okay. Where am I? Alright, I'm down here. Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. Alright. So what this Jewish man was saying, to someone who has been hearing about the Israelites, slavery, and exodus from Egypt since childhood, this story sounds oddly familiar. It was written by Manetho. It was written by Manetho, an Egyptian priest who lived in the 3rd century BCE. So you know this is a long time. This was long before Jesus Christ. Hell, even long before Abraham, who lived in the 3rd century BCE. this man, Manetho, was putting down giving. He was a man that was writing down history, basically what was giving the lesson, the history of what happened. Where did the story of Moses really come from? So Manetho, an Egyptian priest who lived in the 3rd century BCE, who evidently based his account on ancient hieroglyphics, inscriptions preserved in the Egyptian tombs. To a great extent, we can view the story of the enslaved lepers and their leaders, Osarseph, as the Egyptian version of the Exodus story. I'm sorry if I'm a little too loud because I got a mic on. Manetho's tale continued by recounting that the joint army of lepers and shepherds from Jerusalem, there we go people, from Jerusalem, took over the kingdom of the Nile, vandalized the statues of the gods, and let it rain cruelty over the kingdom. Now you gotta understand something. He don't give how long the reign is, but if you go into Wikipedia, it lasted for about oh my God. It lasted for about 13 years. Excuse me. I'm going to have to pause this for a second. All right. Something. Go ahead, baby. Something, little malfunction happened. I have to say, that's why I said I'd be back. Yeah. But, so I'm trying to figure out where I was. And it said, okay, Manetho, an Egyptian priest. Let me go back. Manetho, an Egyptian priest who lived in the 3rd century BCE, who evidently based his account on the ancient hieroglyphics inscription preserved in the Egyptian tombs. To a great extent, we can view the story of enslaved lepers and their leaders, Osarseph, as the Egyptian version of the Exodus story. So basically, you're basically what this man is saying. Now you can see the Exodus, where the Exodus story, as far as about like when Moses came to Pharaoh, said, "Let my people go," what God said the Lord. About that's the Exodus they talking about, when Moses led all the children of Israel out of Egypt. That's the Exodus story. You know what I mean? What they talking about. It is very familiar with Osarseph's story. You know what I mean? And you're going to get into see how it became plagiarized. All right? Okay. Moving on. Oh, let me not. I'm going a little further. Manetho's tale continued by recounting that the joint army of lepers and shepherds from Jerusalem took over the kingdom of the Nile. Now, that kingdom, what they're talking about is, it lasted for only 13 years. The reign lasted for 13 years. It was so bad. It was very. They tore Egypt place. They tore up the Egyptian god. They tore up the statues. Here it is saying they vandalized the statues of the gods and let reign of cruelty over the kingdom. So these guys were savage. You know what I mean? And if you go to Wikipedia about Osarseph, it goes even more in depth how savagery and how savage they were. So they let a reign of cruelty. They was murderous over the kingdom. They quit Egypt. They quit Egypt only when Pharaoh came with a large army and drove them northward. So again, the Pharaoh came back with a greater army, and the Hyksos and the lepers, the so-called Hebrew Israelites, was drove out. Now, was Moses actually an Egyptian priest who led a revolt against his country? Various writers have raised this theory on numerous occasions in the past, from the Hellenistic period to the 20th century. It is supported by, among other things, the recurrent appearance in ancient Egyptian sources of the name Mos, which was fairly common among the Egyptian nobility. Unfortunately, Manetho's book has been lost to history. The Moses Osarseph story reached us thanks to Flavio Josephus, the 1st century CE Jewish come Roman historian, who quotes him in his book Against Apion. I know a lot of you Christian people, y'all know who Josephus is. I hope y'all know who Josephus is. Josephus tries to undercut the Egyptian priest Manetho's version. In other words, they're trying to say Josephus Josephus was not around Manetho's time. Basically, Josephus saw the writings of Manetho's version and he tried to undercut it. In other words, he tried to plagiarize Manetho's version of the event. All right, and presents. Oh my. Okay, unfortunately, Manetho's book has been lost to history, and Moses Osarseth's story reached us thanks to Flavio Josephus, 1st century CE Jewish come Roman historian, who quotes him in his book Against Apion. Josephus tries to undercut the Egyptian priest Manetho's version. Like I said, he tried to undercut by plagiarizing it, all right, and present it as ridiculous story that is rife with contradictions. Scholars today are divided over whether Manetho's version of the birth of the Israelites is actually a deliberate distortion of the biblical story about the Exodus from Egypt. First of all, let me go back over that again. Scholars today are divided over whether Manetho's version of the birth of the Israelites is actually a deliberate distortion of the biblical story about the Exodus from Egypt. There shouldn't be no distortion about that, or a lie. For one, there is no records of Hebrews, first of all, being enslaved as the word Hebrew. You know what I mean? That is bullcrap. You know what I mean? These are nothing but these religious people trying to save their fabricated, made-up religion. That's all they're trying to do. So, now, or is perhaps based on the certain historical elements that were preserved in Egypt and were passed down to him. Basically talking about Manetho's version, was it passed down to him and all that other stuff. You know what I mean? The bottom line is Manetho's version, they try to shut it down, but again, the facts still remain. They try to hide Manetho's version. That's what they try to do. And this is why I said a lot of you Hebrews are nothing but false. Y'all fake. Y'all ain't got no religion. Y'all religion is made up. This was a Jewish man. You Jewish people, the Jewish people came up with this damn shit and try to give it and pass it over like, you know what I mean? But it's all fabricated and plagiarized. No different than everything that the Western man came in contact with, he plagiarized. Now, Egyptologist Jane Asman is of the second opinion. Had a second thought about it. Asman, author of the book Moses the Egyptian, argues that the story Manetho's recount is based on traditions that were left over from traumatic events in Egyptian history. He's giving his opinion. This is an opinion now. This is not when you go and start going into detail. This is not of a. He's just giving it of an opinion about Manetho's version. All right. Trying to say Manetho's account is based on traditions that were left over from two traumatic events in his Egyptian history. I said history. Wow. that were left over. Okay, the religious revolution by Pharaoh Akhenaten, known as the heretic king, who tried to ban idol worship and impose monotheistic religion with the sun god Aten at its center. In Egypt, conquest by Semitic Hyksos shepherds. By the Semitic Hyksos shepherds. The Hebrews, that's right, the Hebrew Gomer called himself Shemitic. Semitic Hyksos shepherds. Shemitic Hebrews shepherds. That's all they are. The Hyksos are the Hebrews. Osman contends that the story of the Exodus from Egypt as told in the Bible is a version of that affair. The nomads' takeover and expulsion that had been preserved in Canaan and found expression in the Torah. Whether true or false, Manetho's version of the Exodus from Egypt is among the first countless theories and myths that grew around the biblical story down through the generations. These theories try to solve the mystery of the story in various ways and imbue it with various meanings. While Josephus Flavius denies Manetho's story about the leper revolt, he provides another odd tale of his own in his work. So Josephus going to give another odd tale of his version. Antiquities of the Jews, Josephus tells a little publicized chapter in Moses' life. So basically, Josephus going to tell you that this is what they're giving you right here. This is what Josephus added about, as far as give you a little more detail about Moses' life. This fictional, this character that they're creating. Exodus leaves blank the chapter of Moses' life from the time he was saved as a baby by Pharaoh's daughter until he witnessed the suffering of his people and killed the Egyptian taskmaster. But Flavius provides details. Now, listen. He provides details. He recounts that Moses was raised in Pharaoh's palace and on reaching adulthood was appointed chief of the army and led the Egyptian troops in the war against the Ethiopian enemies. That is nowhere in ancient texts and ancient history of ancient Kemet. That's for number one. But he just basically telling you what Flavius is doing. It was a tough battle to mislead the enemy. Moses guided the Egyptian army. This is him. He added to. It was a tough battle to mislead the enemy. Moses guided the Egyptian army along the unexpected route through the desert, but there he had to contend with a surprising foe, flying snakes, which according to Flavius, are born in massive numbers from the desert soil. Moses came up with a brilliant strategy to overcome this obstacle. He ordered baskets made and placed in them the birds known in Egypt as ibises or abasis. He realized the ibis in the desert, and they hunted the snakes, clearing the way for the Egyptian army with Moses at the helm. When the Egyptian army reached Sheba, now you know Queen of Sheba, Sheba, which is the Ethiopian. The Ethiopians' capital, Moses faced another problem. The city was walled and sat on an island in the Nile. The Egyptians would have had to retreat had it not been for an act of treason on the Ethiopian side. Therbis, the daughter of the Ethiopian king, saw Moses over the wall and fell head over heels in love with him. She sent one of her servants to make him an offer. The city would hand it over to Moses on condition that he marry her. Look at this shit. Moses welcomed the deal, and the city was surrendered without a fight. Moses returned to Egypt with an Ethiopian wife. Clearly, this is totally bullshit, because there is no writing or art or anything about Moses. It's all bullshit. Good, nice one, Josephus. We tend to believe Josephus when he tells the revolt against the Romans and the suicide of Masada's defenders. But for some reason, the story of Moses, the general, never took root in Jewish historical lore. The Bible scholars Yair Zakovich and Avigdor Shinen claim in their book that's not what the good book says. Hebrew Yehuda Osarseph that Josephus' words might reflect an ancient tradition that was prevalent amongst the ancient Israelites regarding Moses' adventures in the early part of his life, i.e. at Pharaoh's court. The editors of the Torah say Zakovich and Shinen tried to exercise that tradition because it portrayed Moses as a collaborator with the Egyptians. While Jews have been handing down the story of the Exodus from Egypt from generation to generations, other peoples and cultures have expressed an interest in it as well. The Quran, for example, contains a version of the Exodus that is similar to the biblical version, except that it includes a guest appearance by a surprising figure, Haman. The well-known villain from the book of Esther appears in the Quran as Pharaoh's right-hand man, and at the end of the story, he drowned along with the king. Bullshit. Apparently, there is a connection between the name Osiris, advisor in the book of Esther, that Pharaoh, chief minister in the Quran, but some argue that the name comes from the ancient Egyptian title Ha-Amen, which was reserved for high-ranking officials in the pharaonic court, or the pharaonic court. Christian scholars, particularly during the Renaissance period, were partial to a different theory that held that Moses was introduced to monotheistic belief by an Egyptian priest named Hermes Trismegistus. The basis of this theory is verse from the New Testament book Acts of the Apostles, which describes Moses as learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. In the Enlightenment period, this claim was the basis for scientific theories that the Torah law Moses gave to his people were actually pale copies of the Egyptian laws. You hear that? The Enlightenment period, this claim was the basis for scientific theories that the Torah laws Moses gave to his people were actually pale copies of the Egyptian laws. The German poet Friedrich Schiller went further than any other philosopher of his time in describing the Egyptian education that Moses received, according to his essay. The mission of Moses, the Hebrew boy attended a school for Egypt's priestly caste. There, the idea of monotheism, a primal force that drives the universe, was bequeathed from one generation to the next. However, the priests kept this knowledge a secret so as not to rouse their idol-worshipping people to rebellion, and thus encoded it in form of the hieroglyphs and animal stature. The entirety civil constitution was founded upon the worship of gods, Shiloh rites, and were this caused to collapse. All pillars supporting the entire edifice of the state would have collapsed at the same time. It was still quite uncertain whether the new religion conceived to take its place will also stand firm enough to carry that edifice. During the time he was training to become a priest, Moses memorized the Egyptian hieroglyphs and mysteriously rituals of the order. Because you got to understand, even in ancient Kemet did practice in rituals. Let's be clear. When he came to know the suffering of his enslaved people, he wanted both to save them and reveal to them the secret and the true divinity of whose existence he had learned at the school for priests. But because he knew his people limited capacity for perception, Moses decided to identify that God with the national God of the Hebrews, who was already familiar to them from the tales of their ancestors. Moses revealed the secret of the Egyptian priestly caste, but covered over the part of it with an old new legend. And thus the Hebrew religion was born. Y'all hear that? The Hebrew religion was born. Moses murdered it. Schiller's theory about Moses' Egyptian education and other essays written throughout the 19th century were the source of the most famous theory of our time about the unknown aspects of Moses' story. Sigmund Freud's book, Moses and Monotheism, which came out in 1939, shortly before the author's death. Freud adopted the claim that Moses had been an Egyptian priest. He argued that the circumcision is an Egyptian idea, and that Moses instituted the religion of the Egyptian monotheistic pharaoh Akhenaten among the Hebrews, except that the wise Egyptian forced this faith on the people he had adopted, and the Israelites, a stubborn people, disobeying him, rose up against him. According to the father of the physical analysis, they could not bear such a spiritual, abstract, and lofty religion. So one day they rebelled and killed their leader. A shameful event that was censored from the biblical text and therefore forgotten. Let's read that again. So one day they rebelled, the Hebrews he's talking about, and killed their leader. A shameful event that was censored from the biblical text. They censored that from the biblical text and therefore forgotten. Excuse me. Come on, man. Come on, man. Why is this? As Freud has it, after they murdered Moses, the Jews renounced and imposed burden of the Akhenaten religion, and crowned instead Jehovah, a rude, narrow-minded local god, a violent, bloodthirsty, in Freud's words, who ordered his believers to destroy the people living in Canaan. You hear that? What did it say in the Bible of God's words? Go take the land of Canaan. What do you see right here? I'm going to read that again. A crown instead, a rude, narrow-minded local god, violent and bloodthirsty in Pharaoh's words, who ordered his believers to destroy the people living in Canaan. There y'all go. There go y'all Hebrew God right there. The monotheistic idea was shrouded in darkness. Guilt over the leader's murder remained in the repressed memory. It erupted only 1,000 years later in the writings of the Jewish Saul, later Paul of Tarsus, one of the founders of Christianity. The repressed remorse at the murder of Moses turned into a story of Jesus, the Son of God who was murdered but returned to save the world. Thus, it was a Jew, Freud, who came up with the theory that paints the people of Israel in the harshest light as the murderers of their leader. In other words, trying to paint that as though they look what they've gone through. Look at God's people going through this, but yet as the murderers, but they are the murderers of their leader and founder of their own religion. That's where the Hebrew religion comes from. That's where you get your laws of Moses. And the Lord thy God commanded all these things, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which hath brought thee out of the land of Egypt. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet with thy neighbor's wife. Thou shalt covet with thy neighbor's house. All that other shit. A lot of you Hebrew Israelites, a lot of you Hebrews in the churches does that. So, there you go. Osarseph was the leader of your religion. That's how your Hebrew religion came. Stop playing with me. In the 70 years since Freud published his book, maintained mountains of criticism have been heaped on his murder of Moses theory. These people planned to kill this man because this Jewish man was dropping knowledge and speaking truth. But perhaps something of the Jews' buried grudge against their greatest of heroes surfaced in former Prime Minister Golda Meir's words during the conversation with reporters in Germany in 1973. Let me tell you something that we Israelis have against Moses. Meir said, he took us 40 years through the desert in order to bring us to the one spot in the Middle East that has no oil. Y'all see that? Hotep? Y'all see that? Come on, man, stop playing with me. Y'all Hebrew people, y'all done, man. Y'all finished. I destroyed y'all. 2 birds and 1 stone. I destroyed y'all. Next I want to beat up on Abraham, who the origin of Abraham come from India. Don't make me get on that shit. There he is, Afri Alani, that brother right there. Well, not a brother, but that guy right there. So with that being said, Hotep and I say to the ancient ancestors, and that's it. So there you have it. Y'all can't tell me nothing. Y'all been exposed. Your religion been made up. Y'all been destroyed. You know what I mean? So there's nothing that you Hebrews can tell me. I destroyed y'all. It's over. You can't bang with me. You can't touch me. Yeah, I'm talking trash. So what? Your religion is false. Your religion is fake. It's over. Hotep.